Hello guys, welcome back to the new year, new season. It's going to be kind of a refresher of last season. I had a lot of questions in the off season of things that I did to kind of hit the weights that I did, and a lot of questions. So I had some success this past year. I know I didn't kind of do an end of the year wrap up video or anything like that with the weights of the pumpkin, so I'll kind of go over that and kind of talk a little bit about what I worked on over the winter, and kind of give an update on how I finished out the season, as well as kind of a lot of Q&A. So I got a lot of questions and emails over the winter, and I figured a lot of the questions I got duplicates of, I would share with you today. Down here at the patch, so it's winterized, don't have a whole lot going on, and I figured I'd go over last season, and then also kind of talk a little bit about what my plans are for the 2022 year, what I plan to do differently, what seeds I plan to start, and maybe any other things that I kind of talked about with other growers. So kind of go over that in this video. Got a little bit of a selfie handle on this thing, so hopefully that helps with keeping things steady. As you can see from the patch, don't have any cover crop in. I did do leaf mulch, leaf mold, leaf compost, whatever you want to call it, in the patch. And as you can see, this area here has been turned up. I ran a blade through, a middle plow blade, and I just kind of went down about 14-16 inches with that, and that took up, I'm going to add another 20 by 40 square feet, so what's that, 800 square feet more. Same amount of plants, just 800 square feet more. And pretty much what I found on my big plant is that if I can get the plant to size in enough time, I really like the way a 1200 square foot plant kind of pushed the pumpkin towards the end of the season. So I'm going to try and do 4 plants of 1200 square feet and see how that works out. Hopefully the wind's not too bad for you and you can hear me all right. I'm going to go ahead and get into some of the details surrounding what I did last year based on questions. So I've got this piece of paper here. It's all crumbled up and tore up. I've had this for probably since last October, just different notes and questions that were asked, and we'll go over that. So sorry for the poor camera angle on this. I'm kind of new to filming here, so we'll try and keep it steady for you and on me and on the patch, and maybe look around a little bit. So one of the questions I had given to me a lot was what seed did I grow and why did I grow those particular seeds. And we're in the part of the season where auctions are going on, so a lot of you might be asking that same question to yourself, how do I choose it, what do I look for, things like that. So I ended up growing the actual plants themselves. I ended up growing the 2350 ginger, the Tiger King plant. I ended up growing the 2294.5 Knoll. I ended up growing my 826.5 Bayuk, and then I ended up growing an 1858 Schmidt. We'll work our way from smallest result to biggest result, and we'll kind of talk about that, why I picked what I picked. So the 826.5 Bayuk was a seed that I grew the previous year here, did real well, was kind of acclimated, but I didn't put a whole lot into it as far as nutrients or care or anything like that. I was kind of tied up with building my house and my homestead, and just kind of developing my land a little bit. So I think that might have hurt the genetics a little bit, and then that pumpkin also had a twist in it, which caused a split. It grew really well. I think it split at 26 or 27 days old, and it was right around 500 pounds, almost 600 pounds. And then when I ended up cutting it in half on the other video, I think it was right around day 30, and it was estimating, I think, at 580, 588 or something like that. And so it was still putting on weight. I think that easily could have been a 1,500-pound pumpkin if it didn't split. But you know, I don't know if it was a genetic issue. I don't know if it was the blossom twist. But I decided I'm probably not going to grow that seed again. Just at least from a competitive standpoint, I might try and chuck it into the dirt some other way or something. But it's just not worth the risk when you're putting this much time and effort into growing these things. So going on to the next biggest result was my 1088 Bayuk, which came off the 1858 Schmidt. I ended up crossing the 2350 Ginger into it, which was that pretty orange one, and that came out to be 1,088 pounds. Took it to the state fair at 58 days old, and was a real nice shaped pumpkin. Wasn't as orange as I'd like. I actually grew that seed the previous year, and it produced an orange pumpkin, and this one was more creamish white. But it put the 2350 in it, so it could throw an orange one. And I donated a lot of those seeds to new growers and different people this year, and people who are just looking for seeds. 4-H clubs, I've donated quite a few to those, so it's a good seed for them because I know it's good genetically. It's good, and it shouldn't have any issues. So it's a good starter seed. And then I was on my way to my jacket with my 1883 Bayuk, which was a 2350 Ginger times self. Grew really great. I would say the first 75 days. Kind of slowed down right around 70, 75 days, but it was flying, and ended up having some stem rot near the stump, not at the stump, but like 3 feet past it. So probably something nicked it or got to a crack or something, and I just didn't catch it in time. So I ended up having to cut the stump loose, about 3 or 4 feet of that. Took out some secondaries, and just didn't finish off the season as strong as I wanted to on that particular pumpkin. I think it definitely has 2,000 pound potential. Actually, I know it does because 2 other growers grew that seed and grew 2,000 pound pumpkins. So I know it can do it. And it grew a state record here in Kentucky. So great seed there. I highly recommend it. We'll kind of get into some other things with the seeds there later, but I really enjoyed that plant and that pumpkin. The best plant I had ended up being 1,200 square feet, and that was the 2294 Knoll. It grew 2,376 pounds, which would have been a new Kentucky state record. It also would have been the North American record, or not record, but North American champion this year. But about 2 to 3 weeks before way off, the fields over here next to my property, they're all hay fields for horses and stuff like that, and they got cut for hay. And what I'm thinking is the mice and everything kind of ran for cover, and my plant was the perfect cover for them, and underneath the 2294 is where they ended up. Unfortunately, I have 2 mill fabrics. So for you that don't know or use it, it's used in the paper milling industry, and it's kind of like not a nylon, a woven mesh, but it's covered in kind of like a plastic or whatnot. Allows water to penetrate, but nothing can chew through it or anything like that. And it's kind of like a conveyor belt style, but it's a mesh. And that was the one pumpkin I didn't have one under, and it ended up being my biggest. And unfortunately, the mice chewed on the bottom of the pumpkin. Didn't go through or anything. They just, for whatever reason, only took off skin, and it was probably about 10-12 inches of skin that was removed, caused some discoloration, and it was determined at the weigh off that that was enough damage to disqualify the pumpkin. So definitely sucks, and depending on what side you fall on it, whether you agree or disagree with that particular ruling, it is, you know, up to the sites and the judges to determine to keep things fair. So can't fault them for it, but definitely would have loved to have that one on the books. So that's kind of going on the seeds. Other question is, what year did I start growing in, and what was my personal, or what was my first year growing? How big was that pumpkin? So first year I started growing was 2013, and I ended up growing a 416 pound pumpkin. Pretty orange one. Ended up turning it into Cinderella's carriage for my daughter, and I grew that on 250 square feet. So for those that don't have very much room, you can grow a relatively large pumpkin, 500 pounder on that size allotment. I know that there's some competitive growers who know what they're doing with soil and nutrients and everything and watering, that they grow 1,000 pounders on 150 square feet. So it's not ideal, but you can do it. So don't let anybody tell you can't grow in a small patch. Prior personal best in 2014, I grew a 1,068 pound pumpkin. That was my personal best up until this point. And I grew that in 500 square feet. So doubled the square footage and more than doubled the pumpkin size. You know, I wouldn't consider myself experienced or a veteran grower or anything by any means, but I learned a lot every year, and that's what's important. Is every year you try and improve, and that's what the personal bests are all about. Is about challenging yourself and not necessarily measuring yourself to others. There's been rookies that have come out and grown 2,000 pound pumpkins, and some that come out and grow, you know, 50, 100 pound pumpkins. So everybody's different, and I just don't want you guys getting discouraged on first year out. You only grow a 2, 3, 400 pound pumpkin, because everybody starts somewhere. So you know, me starting at 416 8 years ago, and then growing a 2376. You know, a lot of time and effort and reading and knowledge went into all that. A little bit about, you know, how I ended up here. I moved from Illinois in 2019. I bought this piece of land. It's 7.5 acres total, and it's I would say 25% wooded, 75% fields and hay and whatnot, prairie. It's kind of hilly, and I ended up starting my patch last year in 2020, just to kind of, you know, see how everything was. And that's how I would suggest any new grower to do it. Just put something in the soil where you know you're gonna set up and observe your weather, observe how the sun crosses the patch, right? So where's your shade spots? Where's water flow? How does water flow? You know, what time does the sun come up, come down at different parts of the year? Things like that are very important. When do I pollinate? Was a big one. I pollinated right around June 19th. That's where I like it for the way-offs that I have. That might differ for different areas and how big your plant is, but typically competition pumpkins are pollinated right around the middle of June to late June. You really don't want to go too late into June or even early July, but there has been pumpkins, large ones grown, that were pollinated in early July. Especially if you have an October way off and your weather's fairly good, you can grow some big ones. But that's when I shoot for, is right around June 20th, maybe the week of, I'll say, not necessarily that date, but right around the second week of June to the third week of June is when I want to start getting the ones that I want to determine are my keepers. What did my biggest pumpkin tape? The 2376 ended up taping a total of 468 inches. The circumference was 218, 127 side to side, and 123 blossom to stem. It was a really wide pumpkin. It wasn't real tall. It was fairly tall. and the circumference was just massive. It was kind of an odd pumpkin to measure because it was leaned over forward on its stem side. I probably could have adjusted it a little bit earlier and gotten it up and had a little bit better adjustment as far as the shape of it, but just on the way things worked out, it kept the stem pretty dry on its own, and all I really had to do was pay attention to the blossom. So the fruit itself was carefree, and the plant was pretty easy to grow. So very low maintenance as far as disease and pests, minus the mice. How was the weather this year? Pretty good. Cooler temperatures than normal. We did hit 90s and had a couple 100-degree days and things like that. It's usually pretty warm down here, but it got hot. But what I will say is we had cooler nights. We had a mild spring, mild end of the year, and a lot of rain. So, you know, that's one thing I would tell, especially new growers, is water is very important, and not just you watering, but how rain works on your soil. Make sure you understand how your soil drains, and then how water flows over the surface. Does it go to your patch? Does it drain away from your patch? I have a spot over here. I had 2 foaming stumps on that end of the patch, this far end here, and I'm on a hill. I don't know how easy it is to pick up, but this side slopes down, and it comes down to my patch, and then I have a creek that's on this side, on the woodland side here. There's a creek that goes right through here. So about, I'd say, 35 feet from my patch is a creek. So what it does is it naturally creates water shedding downhill, goes through my patch, and then drains off. I'm going to change the way the far end of my patch diverts water. It's kind of hard to tell, but this end is actually a little bit higher than this end, and probably by a good foot and a half. So I'm going to kind of change the way that the shape is on my patch. I'm going to crown the center up a little bit, and also I'm going to trench the back side. I might even install a weeping tile so that the back side of the patch kind of sheds the water around the back side versus going through, especially on heavier rain events. So that's something I'm going to work out on that. But overall, the weather was really good. Can't complain about it. No major storms. We had 1 windstorm and 1 rainstorm that really knocked out some leaves and vines, but nothing that was like set me back, where it was unrecoverable. So that was good. How big is my patch? So currently it's a 120 feet by 40 feet wide, and I run my plants this way. So the plants can grow 30 feet long before they reach one end of their individual patch, and 40 feet wide, which gives me about 16 to 18 foot side vines if you leave pathways. But like I said, I'm expanding another 800 square feet, so they'll have about 1,200 square feet each now. So that'll give them roughly, I think that's roughly 40 by 35 or something like that. Vine pattern. Do I have a specific vine pattern? There's some people that are have certain vine patterns that differ from others. I guess you'd call it the Christmas tree pattern, but it's kind of a little bit different. I still grow the whole side vines out to the edges, so it's kind of it's rectangular. I dead end my secondaries at about, like I said, 16 feet. And then they usually will grow like an extra foot or so they're probably closer to 17. I do angle them slightly back just so I can grow the secondaries a little compact to each other. So depending on your leaf node distance. Some of them are, say 12 inches between leaf nodes on your main, and others are, you know, 14, 16 inches. I like to put my side vines are right around 12 inches apart, and so they get kind of compact towards the edges. Reason being, I think a lot of it helps to hold the leaves together as far as wind damage, and when you do get heavy rain events, they kind of hold each other up a little bit. I haven't seen any issues with, I guess, the roots getting, kind of affecting each other by being that close. If nothing else, I think what it does is it dries out the soil a little quicker because the roots can uptake. They spread, right, and they're taking up more surface area, so they're able to kind of dry out the soil themselves a little bit quicker. Versus if they were further apart, the roots are further away from each other. It takes longer for that soil to dry out. It also kind of shades off weeds, and once you kind of weed a little bit in your plant, you don't have to go back in there because the canopy shades it out really well. So just how I do it. I do grow the main past the pumpkin. I usually hook it like a 90 degree after the pumpkin, and then I do run one side of secondaries off of that, and then I run the secondary before the pumpkin on the opposite side of where I turn the 90. I run those secondary with tertiaries going straight out. So it's kind of hard to explain, but maybe I'll try and throw up a picture here so you can see. Hopefully I can do that for you, but it just kind of allows me to manage the plant after the fruit a little easier, and it puts more of the energy right near the pumpkin, focused on that area. So just something I do. I am going to try 2 pumpkins this year, similar to what Mike Schmidt does, and he dead ends it at the pumpkin, and then the secondaries just before the fruit, he kind of forks off the tertiaries or the third stage vines, and runs those around the fruit. So I'm going to try that probably on 2 of mine just to see how it goes. I've done that on accident sometimes, snapping the main, and really don't notice a huge difference or anything, but maybe if I'm more intentional about it and setting up the fruit more in line with the main vine, maybe it could. So just going to give that a shot. Soil type and pH. What kind of soil do I have? It's listed from the lab as sandy loam. I'm not in full agreement with that, but that's what it comes up as, and I have tested it in a bottle test, and it does come up kind of like sandy loam, but it's sticky, it's tacky, so there is some clay in there. That's why I say that, but there is quite a bit of sand, and I would agree with what the lab says for the most part, but there's some clay content, some heavier clay content, so it's kind of different. I like it. It's different from what I was back in Illinois, but I like it. It still needs some work, definitely needs some work. Soil structure still needs to be improved, and there's some drainage issues too with it, that even though it's sandy loam, this area in particular here, before I ran the blade through it, it was very compact, and then once I ran the blade through it, I noticed that a lot of water would settle in this area and just sit, so there is some drainage issues. So got to get it mixed up and soil structure a little right, and add perlite, vermiculite, and some other things that I like to add to kind of adjust how the soil structure is. Do I use manures or compost? I have in the past. I have not in this patch, and I probably will not use a manure-based compost in this patch without composting it for a few years. I have started a horse manure compost of my own from a local guy up the road, and I don't have enough to really do the whole patch, so it doesn't really make sense. but I'm probably going to compost it for a few years and do a couple of tests on it before I kind of use it in the pumpkin patch. Um, so that's probably a couple years out. That's at least 2023, maybe 2024 before I even think about using it. Um, and then compost, yes, I use leaf compost, leaf mulch, things like that, shredded leaves. Um, Anytime you add anything to your patch, always know what it is. So do a test on it first. Don't just add something just because other people add it or you think it's good or whatnot. Make sure you know what it is. Make sure there's no pesticides in it. If it's local landfill compost or something like that, because all they're doing is getting people's yard waste and throwing it in there, and it could have pesticides and insecticides or herbicides that you do not want to put in your patch. So more the herbicide of it, that can damage roots and stunt growth. How do I water? I use an overhead watering system, and by overhead, I mean that I use a fan sprinkler. So each plant gets one fan sprinkler, and it covers it pretty well. I use one by Orbit. It's a pretty good sprinkler, and I use spring water. So I have a spring that runs about 50 feet from my patch, runs downhill and feeds into that creek, and I pump the water from the spring into a 275-gallon tote. I'm going to add a second tote this year, and then after it goes to that tote, I have another kind of a Venturi fertilization system that I created. It's not a store-bought one or online bought one, and it's one that I kind of designed myself, and I like it. I'll probably show that in a video when I go to set it up this year. And I really like the way that it kind of puts the fertilizer onto the patch and how I can control it. So I run hose from those all the way over there with a inline pump. So it's I probably got from Tractor Supply or something like that. Again, I'll show that when I do my watering system. And that's about it. It's pretty simple. I don't like drip tape. I've used it. Not bashing it. It's just not for me. It's not for my setup, and um, I don't like the way figuring the gallons per minute and the spacing of everything. It's just not something that I like, and for the cost to set up and maintain every year, I don't see a good return on my investment on that. So a lot of other people do really well with it and are very successful. I'm just not one of them people. Do I use a vine bearing mix? No. I do add things as I bury vines, but I use my soil, my native soil. So my thought behind that is, if your soil is set up the way you like it, you shouldn't need anything other than that to bury your vines. If you need to add something, you can add something. Mycorrhiza, if you feel like it's going to help the roots. I've used humic acid, fulvic acid before. Kelp seaweed. I use kelp seaweed, and then trying to think what else I used. I used the pelletized. I want to say it was humic acid or something like that this year that I really liked. But I don't like to make a hot mix for fresh root zone areas, so I pretty much keep it simple, keep it organic. If I feel like it needs nitrogen or something like that, I kind of treat the place behind where I'm burying, so a more established part of the plant rather than the fresh growth, because you can end up overbearing that area or stunting that area if you're off on it. So I never really treat areas right near the vine tips, whether it be secondaries or main. I do fertilize in front of the plant about halfway through the season, the soil in front of the plant. So when I do my calculations on I have someone help me do the soil calculator, the Langley soil calculator. I figure those in half doses, I guess you'd say. So what I do is, when I put the plants in, I fertilize the area within about 20 square feet or 20 feet around the hole where the plants are going to go. And I break up my fertilizers in half. So I fertilize that area first. Once the plants, running 15 feet, 10 to 15 feet, um, I then lay down the rest of my fertilizers on the other part of the patch. And pretty much the reason I do that is because a lot of those fertilizers will leach or wash away easy. So if you put it at the beginning of the season, say in April, May, by the time June, July, even August rolls around, you're depleted and your plant hasn't even gotten there, right? So um, I typically will add it about halfway, not quite halfway, I would say, you know, I add my amendments in early April, late March, um, and I'll probably end up adding the other half in probably late June, right, right, probably before I do my pollination starting off. So, um, and it's just the soil. You're not fertilizing the plant like that. You're putting that quantity out in front of the plant. What did I do differently this year? So, um, I kind of explained some of the things that I've done differently. I've pretty much done everything differently from the past year because I didn't do anything the previous year. But from the past, when I was trying to grow competitive, I would say that what I've done differently is weeding was very important. Did a lot of research on how CO2 is absorbed into the leaves of plants, and it comes from the underside of the plant. Your organic matter being broken down by microbial activity produces CO2. So that means your soil is producing CO2. And when it produces CO2 and it rises, if the first thing that it comes in contact with is weeds, your weeds are going to take up the CO2, what little CO2 that you're getting from that activity, and not your pumpkin plants. So by weeding, you're actually controlling what little bit of CO2 you're getting naturally from your soil, and it's getting into your pumpkin plants. Um, and then airflow, it cuts down on disease and other issues. You have more stable moisture control. So when you're watering your plants, your soil is more stable in how it absorbs and travels through your soil than if you have weeds. And it's just easier to maintain your plant and kind of keep track of things. You don't have as many pest and disease issues. So I would say vine maintenance, clipping off tertiaries, tendrils, male and female flowers after you've set your fruit. Don't let any grow. No males, no females, because they're wasting a lot of energy. And you know, um, the one thing I did on my 2376 is let the vines grow past the fruit further than I ever have. Um, and I was told after 20 days of pumpkin growth, your plant shuts down and you gotta, dead end your tips. I think it was day like 35 or 40, and I still had vine growth. And it was day 50, and I was still deadending parts of the plant and things like that. So I'm not saying let the plant grow all year long, but I do think for how healthy that plant was, it had a lot of growth. You got to know when to have a release valve for the energy that the plant has. Not all genetics may have that, but that particular one did. Um, I would say also the top on that is my fertilizing routine changed. I was more dialed in with what the plant needed. I'm not a professional at reading plants, but I knew when something was wrong, and I knew that I had to research what it was and find out, whether it was a tissue test that I needed. I did 2 tissue tests, and that really helped me. And also, I did the first one, and it gave me an idea of what my plant was doing. And then I did the second one to make sure that what I changed was the right change. So I think that the 2 tissue tests on the plant really gave me a great idea on how well I deciphered what was needed. Plant vigor and fruit growth. Tiger King was a very vigorous plant out the gate. Kind of slowed down once fruit was set. I would say it was more of a normal plant at that point, but it was always my fastest grower. Same with the fruit. The fruit was amazing the first, like I said, 50, 60, 70 days. Slowed down towards the end, but like I said, I had some other issues that might have been more me than the fruit. And then the 22 94 Knoll ended up being my 2376 Bayuk. Plant was very easy. Nothing about growing these things is easy, but when things go right, when you think you're doing the right things, um, it makes things a lot easier. So just vine bearing, how it grew, leaf size, how it took adjustments to fertilizers. It was a very good plant to grow, and definitely would do that again. When did I put my plants outside? So if I remember correctly, I think it was right around May 5th. I'd have to look back at it, but I think it was right around May 5th. I usually put out the first or second week of May. It might have even been the second week of May. But that's kind of where I shoot for, is right around that time frame. And I do put them in hoop houses. I used PVC pipe and plastic, and for my climate that was enough. I did have to cover them. I do not have electricity in my patch, so I don't have heaters or soil heating cables. What I used this past year was generators to do the pumps, and I used batteries. I had these like 3-watt batteries when I needed to for fans, and that was it. But it wasn't near as much as what I needed. So I got a couple of ideas this year. I'm probably going to do some solar and some other things. So I'm still not going to have like run electricity to my patch. It's probably 300 feet to maybe even longer. It's probably, yeah, it's easily 300 feet to my house. So it's not in the budget, and that's something I'm going to plan on doing in the near future at least. I'm going to try the solar out first. And then seeds I plan to grow this year, I'm going to grow my own. I'm going to grow 2 1883 Bayouks and 2 2376 Bayouks, and hopefully can break that state record again and get my jacket. So with me having a disqualification on my 2376, it was disqualifying me from getting my jacket because the weights didn't equal up to be the 3 fruit for 4,000 pounds. If they did, I would have been over 5,000 pounds. I think it would have been like 5,300 and something pounds. So good season. I'm not complaining whatsoever. Learned a lot. Always learning, right? And I will say that I was happy once I got over the initial depression from the 2376 disqualification. But that's why we do this. It's the enjoyment and excitement of what could happen at the end of the season. So I'll get over it. But for right now, I'm getting things going on the inside, and I'm getting the patch set up. Still not ready to do another plow and a till and do my amendments, but I will be shortly. So if you have any other questions, comments, concerns, feel free to add them. I will try and do pictures of different things and do some editing in this, but I'm new to it, so we'll see if it happens. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please comment below. Helps out if you subscribe and share this, and see you on the next one.